I never thought I'd be grateful for an economic recession, but when Lakeside Amusement Park shut down 3 years ago, it felt like our town could finally breathe again. For decades, that place had been the beating heart of Mill Water, pumping tourists and their money through our streets every summer. But something about it always felt wrong to me. Even as a kid, when my friends would drag me there on sticky July afternoons, I'd find myself hanging back, watching the carousel horses, with their wide, glassy eyes that seemed to follow you. People say the park closed because of the economy, but locals know better. After what happened to the Mitchell boy, found wandering the parking lot at closing time, unable to speak, his parents nowhere to be found, attendance dropped like a stone. The official report called it a family abandonment, but how do 2 adults just vanish from a crowded amusement park without a single security camera catching them leave? So yeah, I was glad when the gates closed for good. The town took an economic hit, sure, but at least the nightmares stopped. Mine anyway, until last month when I lost my job at the mill. 15 years of loyal service ended with a pink slip and a pat on the back. Economic downturn, they said. Same excuse as the park. At 43, with no college degree and a mortgage underwater, my options weren't exactly abundant. That's why when I saw the ad in the local paper, it felt like the universe was playing some cruel joke. Night security guard needed for Lakeside Amusement Park property. Minimal duties, competitive pay. I called the number before I could talk myself out of it. The man who answered identified himself as Mr. Wexler, representing the property management company that had taken over the park after foreclosure. It's just insurance purposes, he explained, voice tinny through the phone. Properties in limbo, original owners bankrupt, new development plans tied up in environmental reviews. We just need a warm body on site to satisfy the insurance company. You'll do rounds once every 2 hours, check for trespassers or damage. That's it. What about all the equipment? I asked. The rides and stuff? Everything's powered down, he assured me. Has been for years. You'll have a small office with power for lights and a microwave. Bring a book. Easiest money you'll ever make. $16 an hour to essentially read books all night in an abandoned amusement park. I'd worked graveyard shifts before. The solitude never bothered me. And $16 an hour meant keeping my house. When do I start? I asked. Tomorrow night. 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., 5 nights a week. I took the job. What choice did I have? Mr. Wexler met me the following evening for orientation, if you could call it that. He was younger than I expected, maybe early 30s, with the polished look of someone who'd never worked with his hands. His BMW looked comically out of place in the cracked concrete parking lot. Main gates stay locked, he explained, handing me a ring of keys that weighed a pound at least. You'll enter through the service entrance on the north side. Your office is in the old administrative building, just a desk, chair, mini fridge. Bathroom still works. We walked the perimeter together as the sun set, casting long shadows across empty walkways once filled with laughing families. Weeds pushed through, cracks in the pavement. The candy-colored paint on the buildings had begun to peel and fade. Nature was already reclaiming what had been taken from it. You'll need to do a full circuit every 2 hours, Wexler continued. There's 9 checkpoint stations. He handed me an electronic key fob. Touch this to each station to prove you made your rounds. The system logs the time. The checkpoint tour took us past all the major attractions. The roller coaster, the cyclone, they'd called it, stood like the skeleton of some prehistoric beast against the darkening sky. The log flume dried up, its concrete channels stained with years of algae. And then, in the heart of the park, The Grand Carousel. Unlike everything else, which had been left to rot where it stood, someone had taken the trouble to cover the carousel with a massive tarp. The edges fluttered slightly in the evening breeze. "Why's this one covered?" I asked. Wexler glanced at it, a flicker of something crossing his face. "Historical value, it's a Denzel, hand-carved in 1918, worth more than everything else. In this park combined." As we completed the circuit, he handed me a flashlight and a cheap flip phone. "For emergencies only. Reception spotty. If there's trouble, call me or 911. Any questions?" Just one burned in my mind. Why did a bankrupt amusement park need overnight security for 3 years after closing? But I kept my mouth shut. $16 an hour. "No questions," I said. "Great. Oh, one more thing." He turned to face me directly, his expression suddenly serious. "The checkpoint rounds are timed, but whatever you do, make sure you're back in the office by 2:45 a.m. Stay there until 3:30, company policy." "Why?" I couldn't help asking. "Insurance liability," he said smoothly. "The system runs diagnostics at 3 a.m., sometimes causes the emergency lights to flicker. We don't want you tripping in the dark." It was a lie, a practiced one, but a lie nonetheless. I nodded anyway. 2:45 to 3:30, stay in the office, got it? "Perfect." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "You'll do fine, Mr. Mitchell." And with that, he left me alone in an abandoned amusement park as night fell completely. My first night was uneventful. Almost boring, in fact. The emptiness of a place designed for crowds has a certain peaceful quality to it. I made my rounds dutifully, touching the key fob to each checkpoint. The beam of my flashlight swept across Silent Game. Booths, their prizes still hanging dusty and unclaimed. Stuffed animals with faded fur stared back with button eyes. The office was small but functional, a metal desk, swivel chair, and a mini fridge that hummed loudly in the silence. I'd brought a thermos of coffee and a dog-eared paperback thriller. Between rounds I read, the hours passing slowly. At 2:30 a.m. I returned to the office as instructed. Curiosity nagged at me. What would happen at 3 a.m.? But $16 an hour meant following instructions. I sat at the desk, book open but unread, watching the minute hand on my watch tick closer to the appointed hour. AM came and went, with nothing but the steady hum of the mini-fridge. I felt foolish for expecting anything else. By the time 3:30 rolled around, I was already planning what snacks to bring for my second night. I finished my shift, drove home as dawn broke over the hills, and slept dreamlessly through the morning. Second night followed much the same pattern. I arrived at 10 p.m., settled into the routine. The checkpoint rounds took about 45 minutes each, leaving me ample time to read between circuits. I explored a bit more during my walks, shining my light into corners of the park that visitors never saw. Behind the cotton candy stand, I found employee lockers still containing uniform items. The first aid station had cabinets of expired bandages and antiseptic. It was like the rapture had happened, everyone vanishing in the middle of their day. During my 12:15 a.m. round, I found myself drawn to the carousel again. The tarp covering it rippled gently, though there was no breeze that night. I approached slowly, flashlight trained on the undulating fabric. Probably just trapped air pockets shifting, I told myself. Still, I kept my distance. Something about the way the tarp moved reminded me of breathing. I was halfway through my 2 a.m. round when I first heard it. The soft, distant notes of music. Not carousel music, nothing so obvious. This was fainter, like a music box being wound somewhere far. I stopped, holding my breath to listen. Nothing. Old buildings settle, I muttered to myself, continuing my patrol. But as I passed the shuttered ice cream parlor, I heard it again, clearer this time. A delicate melody just at the edge of recognition. I checked my watch. 2:38 a.m. I should be heading back to the office. The music stopped as suddenly as it had started. The silence that followed felt heavier somehow, more deliberate. I quickened my pace, making it back to the office by 2:43, 2 minutes ahead of schedule. Sitting at the desk, I tried to rationalize what I'd heard. Old pipes. The wind through metal structures. My imagination, fueled by the inherent creepiness of an abandoned park at night. But at precisely 3 a.m. the power flickered. Once, twice, and went out completely. Wexler had mentioned this might happen. Diagnostic tests, nothing to worry about. Still, in the sudden darkness, with only my flashlight cutting a narrow beam, the office felt much smaller. I swept the light across the room, and that's when I noticed the mini-fridge had stopped humming. Complete silence enveloped me for exactly 17 minutes. I counted every second before the lights sputtered back to life. The power returning should have been reassuring. Instead, it made the hairs on my neck stand up, because in that brief moment between darkness and light, I could have sworn I heard the distant, cheerful notes of the carousel. When my shift ended at 6 a.m., I did something I hadn't planned. Instead of driving straight home, I parked on the hill overlooking the amusement park and watched as the rising sun painted the dilapidated structures in gold. From this distance, Lakeside almost looked alive again, waiting for gates to open and children to flood in. As I was about to drive away, a movement caught my eye. In the heart of the park, where I knew the carousel stood under its tarp, something fluttered, not like fabric in the wind, but like someone had lifted a corner and let it fall again. I blinked, and whatever I'd seen was gone, hidden in the growing glare of morning light. It was probably nothing, had to be nothing, because if it was something, I wasn't sure I could go back for a third night, but $16 an hour meant I would. Night 3, and I brought reinforcements, a better flashlight, a portable power bank for my phone, and a small digital recorder. If I heard that music again, I wanted evidence. Not that I believed in ghosts or anything. This was just to rule out rational explanations. Maybe kids were breaking in somehow. Maybe homeless people had found shelter. My first rounds proceeded normally. I was becoming familiar with the rhythm of the park at night now, which areas stayed darker, which collected more shadows. I knew which floorboards creaked and which doors needed an extra shove. Around midnight, during my second patrol, I decided to investigate the carousel more closely. $16 an hour didn't include detective work, but curiosity had been eating at me since Wexler's strange instructions about the 3 a.m. rule. The carousel stood silent under its massive tarp. Up close, I could see it was high-quality material, the kind used to cover boats during winter storage. It was secured with rope at the base, tied to the platform edge in neat, professional knots. Definitely not thrown on as an afterthought. I walked the perimeter slowly, considering my options. I could try to peek underneath, but something told me that would be crossing a line I shouldn't cross. Instead, I shined my flashlight along the base, where the tarp met the platform. That's when I noticed the footprints, small, like a child's, in the dust that had collected on the carousel's platform. They came from nowhere and disappeared, under the tarp. I took a step back, heart suddenly pounding. Kids were getting in somehow, just as I'd suspected. I'd need to report this to Wexler. But as I studied the prints more carefully, something didn't add up. There were no outgoing tracks, only those leading in, and they looked fresh. My watch read 12:23 a.m. I still had plenty of time before the 3 a.m. deadline. I should complete my round, document the footprints, and check the perimeter fence for breaches. I continued my patrol, but now every shadow seemed to move in my peripheral vision. Every creak of the old structures set my nerves on edge. I found myself walking faster, the beam of my flashlight jerking nervously from spot to spot. Near the old tilt-a-whirl, I found something else unexpected. A small, weathered stuffed rabbit, propped against the operator's booth. It hadn't been there during my previous rounds. I was certain of that. Its fur was matted and grey with age, one button eye missing, the other hanging by a thread. I approached cautiously and crouched to examine it. A child's toy, certainly, but old, much older than the park's 3-year abandonment would suggest. Sewn to its paw was a faded tag that read, "Property of Emma, 1973, nearly 50 years old." I stood up quickly, scanning the area with my flashlight. "Hello? Is someone there?" My voice echoed back at me, bouncing off metal and concrete. I took a picture of the rabbit with my phone, then continued my rounds, now actively looking for signs of intruders. But the park remained still and empty. Until I reached the funhouse. Unlike most of the attractions, the funhouse entrance was boarded up, thick plywood secured over the garish clown face that had once served as its doorway. But one of the boards had been pulled loose at the bottom corner, creating a gap just large enough for a small person to squeeze through. Or a child. I shined my light through the gap, but could see nothing beyond a dusty floor and the edge of what looked like a mirror. Funhouses were always full of mirrors. I checked my watch again. 1:17 a.m. I should move on, complete my circuit. Instead, I found myself kneeling, testing the loose board. It moved easily, the nails partially pulled out. With minimal effort, I could widen the gap, perhaps see more of what lay inside. $16 an hour, I reminded myself. Just patrol and report. But as I started to stand, something caught my ear, that same music box melody I'd heard the night before, now unmistakably coming from within the funhouse. I froze, listening intently. The tune was clearer now. A simple, lilting melody that sounded vaguely familiar, like something from my own childhood. "Hello?" I called again, louder this time. "This is security. The park is closed." The music stopped abruptly. In the silence that followed, I heard what sounded like a child giggling, distant, muffled, but distinctly human. That settled it. Kids were breaking in, probably local teenagers using the park for drinking or who knows what else. I needed to document this, call Wexler, maybe even the police. I pulled out my phone to record a video of the loose board and the opening, narrating what I'd found and heard, but when I played it back, my voice came through clearly, while the childish laughter was missing entirely. I checked the time. 1:36 a.m. I still had one more full round before the mysterious 3 a.m. curfew. I decided to complete my patrol and return to the office early, where I could call Wexler despite the late hour. Kids breaking in was a liability issue. He'd want to know immediately. As I walked away from the funhouse, the hairs on my neck stood up again, the unmistakable feeling of being watched. I turned back quickly, flashlight beam cutting through the darkness. For just a moment, so brief I could almost convince myself I'd imagined it, I saw a small, pale face peering through the gap in the boards. Then it was gone. Section 4. The Carousel Mystery, 8:35 words. I made it back to the office at 2:15 a.m., heart still racing from what I'd seen, or thought I'd seen, at the funhouse. I tried calling Wexler, but as he'd warned, the reception was terrible. After 3 failed attempts, I gave up. This could wait until morning. I sat at the desk, reviewing the photos on my phone. The stuffed rabbit looked even more weathered in the harsh flash of the camera. I zoomed in on the name tag, property of Emma, 1973. Something about it nagged at me. On impulse, I did a quick internet search. Lakeside Amusement Park accidents, Emma, 1973. The results loaded slowly with the poor connection, but what appeared made my blood run cold. A newspaper headline from the local archive. Search continues for missing girl, 7, last seen at Lakeside Park. The article was paywalled, but the preview text told me enough. Emma Winthrop, 7, disappeared while visiting Lakeside Amusement Park with her family on June 12, 1973. Last seen near the carousel. I nearly dropped my phone. The carousel. The same one Wexler had made a point of mentioning was valuable and historically significant. The same one carefully covered while everything else in the park rotted in the open air. I checked my watch, 2:38 a.m. The 3 a.m. deadline approached. Whatever Wexler had warned me about was less than 30 minutes away. But this couldn't be a coincidence. A girl named Emma vanishes near the carousel in 1973. Nearly 50 years later, her stuffed rabbit appears out of nowhere near the tilt-a-whirl. And someone is moving around the park at night. I had a decision to make. Follow Wexler's instructions and stay put, or investigate the carousel before whatever happened at 3 a.m. began. Against all better judgment, I grabbed my flashlight and digital recorder and headed back out. The park felt different now, tense, expectant, as if the very air was holding its breath. My footsteps seemed unnaturally loud on the concrete paths. I moved quickly, checking my watch obsessively. 2:47 a.m. I was officially breaking protocol. When I reached the carousel, I stood for a long moment just observing. The tarp remained still, no unnatural movement. With a deep breath, I approached and found the edge where the rope secured it, to the platform. This was stupid, reckless, possibly grounds for termination, but I needed to know. I untied one section of rope, just enough to create an opening. Kneeling, I lifted the edge of the tarp and shined my flashlight underneath. The carousel was even more beautiful than I had imagined. Dozens of hand-carved horses frozen in eternal gallop, their wooden flanks painted in faded but still vibrant colors. Gold and silver leaf accents caught the beam of my light, twinkling like stars. The craftsmanship was exquisite. Each horse, unique with flowing manes and expressive eyes, but it was the horse nearest to me that made my heart skip. Unlike the others, this one, a white mare with a golden bridle, had a small handprint on its flank, a child's handprint pressed in what looked horribly like dried blood. I scrambled backward, dropping the edge of the tarp. My watch read 2:56 a.m. I should run back to the office now, make it before the 3 a.m. deadline. Instead, I turned on my digital recorder and lifted the tarp again. This is night 3, I spoke quietly into the recorder. I'm at the carousel. There appears to be a stain on one of the horses. It looks like a child's handprint. I panned my flashlight around the rest of the visible portion of the carousel. The central column was decorated with ornate mirrors and paintings of pastoral scenes, but one mirror was cracked, the glass spiderwebbed. From a point of impact, and reflected in that broken mirror was a child's face. I gasped, jerking the flashlight up, but there was no one behind me. I looked back at the mirror. The face remained, watching me with solemn eyes. A little girl, perhaps 7 or 8, with braided hair and a striped shirt that looked straight out of the early 1970s. "Emma," I whispered. The reflection didn't move or speak, but slowly, sadly, she nodded. My watch beeped, a 3 a.m. alarm I'd set as a precaution. I should be in the office. Right now. As if responding to the beep, the girl's expression changed from sadness to fear. Her mouth opened in what looked like a warning cry, though no sound came out. Then, from deep within the carousel's mechanism, I heard a sound that made my skin crawl, the slow, mechanical winding of gears that had been silent for years. Metal groaned against metal. Something was powering up. The tarp began to ripple violently, as if caught in a windstorm. I backed away, watching in horror as the heavy fabric billowed upward, revealing more of the carousel beneath. I turned to run, but froze when music erupted. From the carousel, not the tinkling melody I'd heard before, but the full, thunderous organ music of an operating merry-go-round. The brass pipes that crowned the center column gleamed in my flashlight beam as they pumped out a cheerful tune that sounded obscene in the dead of night. And the horses. God help me. The horses began to move. The carousel spun slowly, at first, as if awakening from a deep sleep. Each horse rose and fell on its brass pole, the mechanism creaking but functioning perfectly despite years of disuse. The tarp had somehow been thrown completely off, pooling around the platform like discarded skin. I stood frozen, flashlight trained on the revolving nightmare before me. This was impossible. The power was off, had been for years. There was no way this thing could be operational. Yet round and round it went, the calliope music growing louder, more distorted with each rotation. The lights along the canopy flickered to life, red, blue, yellow bulbs casting sickly color across the abandoned park. And there, riding the white horse with the bloody handprint, was Emma. She wasn't solid like a living child. I could see the brass pole through her torso, the painted mane of the horse through her legs. But she was unmistakably there, her sad eyes fixed on me as she rose and fell with the horse's mechanical gallop. "Emma," I called out, finding my voice at last. "Emma Winthrop." The carousel made another rotation. When her horse came around, again she had one arm extended toward me, small fingers splayed as if reaching for help. Her mouth moved, but the music drowned out any words. I glanced at my watch. 3:08 a.m. Whatever was happening had started right at 3, just as Wexler had warned. I should run back to the office, lock the door, pretend I'd never seen any of this. Instead, I stepped closer, pulling out my phone to record. The screen remained black, the battery completely drained, despite being at 80% minutes ago. The digital recorder in my other hand still showed a red recording light, so I lifted it and continued documenting. The carousel is operating without power. There appears to be someone riding it. A child matching the description of Emma Winthrop, missing since 1973. The music skipped, like a record with a scratch, then resumed at a higher pitch. The carousel began spinning faster. Emma's horse came around again. This time she was standing. On its back, one hand clutching the pole, the other still reaching toward me. Her expression had changed from sadness to urgency. "What do you want?" I called out, taking another step closer. "How can I help you?" The carousel completed another rotation. Now all the horses carried riders, translucent children of various ages, their clothing spanning decades. Some looked as recent as the early 2000s, Others as old-fashioned as the 1920s. All had the same hollow-eyed expression. All reached toward me as they passed. "Jesus Christ," I whispered into the recorder. "There's more of them, many more." The music shifted again, becoming a discordant jumble of notes that bore little resemblance to a melody. The carousel spun faster still, the horses blurring together. A heavy hand fell on my shoulder. I jumped, spinning around with my flashlight. Raised like a weapon, Mr. Wexler stood there, his face grim in the harsh light. "I told you to stay in the office between 2:45 and 3:30, he said, his voice perfectly calm despite the chaos behind me. "Everyone always thinks they know better." "What is this?" I demanded, gesturing at the whirling carousel. "What's happening?" "You wouldn't believe me if I told you," he replied, eyes fixed on the ghostly children. "No one ever does until they see it themselves." "Try me," I said, my voice steadier than I felt. Wexler sighed, his breath visible in the suddenly cold air. The carousel was the first attraction installed at Lakeside back in 1918, built by Gustav Denzel himself. "Do you know what makes a Denzel carousel special, Mr. Mitchell?" I shook my head, unable to look away from the spectral scene. The wood. Denzel believed certain trees absorbed energies. He selected timber from places with history, battlefields, execution grounds, ancient burial sites. This particular carousel, he gestured toward the spinning platform. Its center pole came from a tree that grew outside an asylum. The horses were carved from wood harvested near a children's tuberculosis hospital. "That's insane," I said. "Wood is just wood, is it?" Wexler nodded toward the ghostly riders. "Every child you see there disappeared from this park. Emma Winthrop was the first, but not the last. The carousel calls to them somehow. One child every decade or so. Always. The sensitive ones, the lonely ones. That's why the park closed," I realized. "The Mitchell boy." Wexler nodded. "He was lucky. Found before the carousel could take him completely. But he saw things that destroyed his mind." "And you knew about this? All this time?" "My family has managed this property since 1950, he said quietly. "We've tried destroying it, burning it, breaking it apart. Nothing works. It reassembles itself. The only thing we can do is contain it." The carousel began to slow, the music winding down like a dying music box. The ghostly children became clearer as the speed decreased. "What do they want?" I asked, watching Emma make another circuit. "To be found," Wexler said simply. "Their bodies are here, somewhere in the park. We've looked, believe me. But only they know where." As if on cue, Emma's horse came around one last time. The carousel shuddered to a halt, her horse stopping directly in front of us. She stood on its back, no longer reaching out, but pointing, not at us, but past us, toward the fun house. "She's been doing this for 50 years, Wexler said softly. "Every night at 3 a.m., pointing, trying to tell us, but we can't get into the fun house." "What do you mean? I saw an opening earlier tonight." Wexler's head snapped towards me. "You what?" "A loose board by the entrance. I heard music coming from inside." Emma's translucent form flickered like a failing light bulb. Her mouth opened in a silent scream, her finger stabbing repeatedly toward the funhouse. "She's never done that before," Wexler whispered. "Something's different tonight." As we watched, Emma leapt from her horse, the first time, according to Wexler's shocked expression, that any of the spectral children had ever left the carousel. Her feet made no sound as they hit the platform. She stood before us, barely visible now, her form fading like morning mist under the sun. With her last remaining energy, she reached out and grasped my hand. Her touch was ice, burning cold against my skin. But the sensation that flooded through me wasn't pain. It was memories, Emma's memories, flashing through my mind in a torrent of images. The funhouse, a hidden door behind the hall of mirrors, a man in a park uniform, his face smiling, then twisted with rage, pain, darkness, a small space beneath the floorboards. I gasped, yanking my hand away. Emma was gone, the carousel empty and still. The lights along its canopy flickered once more, then died. "She showed you something?" Wexler said. It wasn't a question. My watch read 3:22 a.m. The event wasn't over yet, according to Wexler's timeline. "We needed to go to the funhouse," I said. "Right now." We ran through the empty park, our flashlight beams bouncing wildly across abandoned attractions. Wexler kept pace despite his office attire, his breath coming in white puffs in the unnaturally cold air. "Why didn't you tell me the truth?" I demanded as we ran. "Why the secrecy?" "Would you have taken the job if I had?" He shot back. Previous guards who knew the truth couldn't handle it. They'd leave before 3 a.m. or never show up again after the first night. We reached the funhouse. The loose board I'd discovered earlier was now completely torn away, the opening wide enough for an adult to crawl through. "That wasn't like this before," I said, swinging my flashlight beam across the enlarged gap. Something has been busy." Wexler pulled a crowbar from inside his coat. He'd come prepared. "Stand back," he ordered, wedging the metal tool into the gap and pulling with surprising strength. More nails popped free, the board splintering as it gave way. Within minutes, we'd created an opening large enough to step through. The funhouse, beyond, was a black void, swallowing our flashlight beams. "I've been maintaining this property for 15 years, Wexler said, his voice tight. "Not once has the funhouse allowed entry. The boards resist removal, tools break, batteries die. It protects itself somehow." "Until tonight," I said. "Until you," he corrected. "Something's changed with you here." I recalled Emma's memories, forced into my mind through her ghostly touch. "I think I know where to look." The funhouse interior smelled of dust and mildew, the air thick and stagnant after years without ventilation. Our flashlights revealed distortion mirrors lining a narrow hallway, our reflections stretched and compressed into monstrous parodies of ourselves. "The hall of mirrors should be straight ahead," I said, moving forward cautiously. The floor creaked. Beneath our weight, boards sagging with rot. The corridor opened into a circular room filled with mirrors of all shapes and sizes. Some were cracked, others clouded with age, but all still functioned, creating an infinite regression of our figures, stretching in all directions. In Emma's memory, there was a hidden door, I murmured, running my hand along the wall between two tall mirrors. "Behind one of these?" Wexler tapped his knuckles methodically along the wall, listening for hollow spots. I copied him on the opposite side. My watch read 3:28 a.m. We had little time before whatever phenomenon allowed this access would end. "Here," Wexler called, his voice echoing strangely in the mirrored chamber. "This sounds different." I joined him at a full-length mirror with an ornate gold frame. Unlike the others, this one's surface was spotless, as if recently cleaned. Our reflections stared back at us, but something was wrong. They moved a fraction of a second too late, like poor satellite connections. "Stand back," Wexler warned, raising his crowbar. Wait, I said, placing my hand against the mirror's cool surface. In Emma's memory, there had been a trick to it. I pressed firmly on the bottom right corner, then the top left. The mirror swung inward with a soft click, revealing a narrow passage beyond. "How did you know?" Wexler whispered. "Emma showed me." The passage behind the mirror was tight, forcing us to move single file, our shoulders brushing against the rough wooden walls. It extended about 15 feet before opening into a small room. An employee, break area long abandoned, a table, 3 chairs, a refrigerator with the door hanging open, its contents long since rotted away. "This isn't on any of the park blueprints," Wexler said, sweeping his flashlight around the space. But I wasn't listening. I was staring at the floor, where Emma's memories had directed me. In the far corner, the floorboards were a slightly different shade than the rest, newer, less weathered. "There," I pointed, "under the floor." Wexler approached cautiously, testing each step. The replacement boards creaked, but held his weight. He knelt, examining the seams. "No nails," he observed, "just laid in place." Together we lifted the boards, revealing a crawl space beneath. The beam of my flashlight illuminated what we'd come to find: a small skeleton curled in a fetal position. Wispy remains of what had once been a striped shirt clung to the bones. A child-sized skull faced the wall. "Emma," I whispered. But she wasn't alone. As we widened the opening, our lights revealed more remains. 6 skeletons of varying sizes, all children, all carefully arranged in the cramped space. "My God," Wexler breathed. "All of them. All the missing children."